everybody and welcome along to a brand new video today where, well, we're 2 days away from Christmas and obviously this year unfortunately there is no Doctor Who Christmas special. Tomorrow I'm going to be ranking all of the new Who Christmas specials from number 13 to number 1, so do check that out tomorrow evening, Christmas Eve. But this evening I thought I might take a look back at the sort of forgotten Doctor Who Christmas special because everybody thinks it was the Christmas Invasion, 2005, David Tennant's first story. That was the first Doctor Who Christmas special, wasn't it? But no. We're going back to 1965, 53 years ago, where Doctor Who just happened to fall on Christmas Day that year. And so the production team, mid-story, had to put together a rather bizarre 25-minute Doctor Who Christmas special. Yeah, so this was back in the William Hartnell era, back in 1965, where this was during the 12-part epic story The Daleks' Master Plan, where we got to episode 7, and it just so happened that the sort of series was airing on Saturdays, and that Saturday that year was on the 25th of December. And so they sort of decided, actually, we can't have the normal story because a lot of people aren't going to be sort of watching on Christmas Day. People might miss it whether with family or whatever. So you don't want to have a sort of too much plot based on this current storyline kind of in this particular episode. But obviously we need to produce something. And so they came up with this episode called The Feast of Stephen, which I think is probably one of the most bizarre episodes of Doctor Who I've ever watched or seen in the form that we can, because of course this episode doesn't exist in any form anymore. Well, it's only got the audio is all we can hear, but visually there's nothing. There's a few pictures, telesnaps from when the episode was airing, but other than that there is only the audio. And it's unlikely that this episode is pretty most unlikely of any Doctor Who episode to be recovered from the lost episodes, because this story was never reproduced and sold abroad or anything like that. So literally it was shown on Christmas Day on BBC One in 1965 and was never shown anywhere in the world ever again. So the only chance it's got of being recovered in any form is if somebody happens to record it on a camera pointing it at the screen in 1965 and still to this day has not returned it. So it's highly, highly, highly unlikely. In some ways that's not really a bad thing because this is hardly a good episode. It's just very, very strange. So yes, this episode starts out having been, they've sort of just escaped from the Daleks for the time being in the TARDIS. The Doctor, Stephen, and Sarah Kingdom, who is a companion for kind of like half of this 12-part story. I think she comes in episode 4 and sort of ends up with the Doctor and Stephen for the rest of the story, and spoiler alert, she dies at the end of the story. And for some reason they turn up in 1960s London, or no, 1960s sort of Liverpool, I think, or something like that, somewhere up north, at a police, sort of outside a police station. So the Doctor comes out the police box and gets arrested, and that's already a bit weird. There's this whole sort of, they're like at this sort of police station for about 10 minutes of the episode, not really seemingly to achieve or do anything. The Doctor gets captured, he gets interviewed by the police, and he says, oh, I'm the traveller from time, space, and whatever. They think he's a nutter. He sort of escapes because Stephen gets to nick a police uniform and pretends to be a police officer, and they sort of randomly run away and escape. And it's just kind of like, what actually happened? It just seemed completely pointless and a bit of yeah. I could kind of, in this bit of it, you can understand a bit more what's going on, but it still seems wholly bizarre why they wrote this into the episode. And then also the fact that this is about the first 11, 12 minutes of this 25-minute story, and then they get in the TARDIS, they've escaped, they leave, and then we go off to somewhere completely different. Like, we have about a 30-second bit of reminding of what the story is. It's all about the Daleks and sort of keeping this terranium away from Marvek Chen and the Daleks so that they can't blow up the whole universe and everything. And they sort of give us 30 seconds to just remind us that's actually the plot that we're talking about. But now let's go and do something else a bit silly and stupid because it's Christmas Day. And we end up in a film set in the 1920s. And it's even more bizarre, I think it's fair to say, this half of the episode, this next 10 minutes, when they stumble across Charlie Chaplin, an American film director from the 1920s, who I think is quite famous. There's random, it's almost filmed like it's a silent movie, just from like a 1920s silent film, but with some dialogue as well, because they've got those sort of on-screen text cards that you used to get in those really old 1920s, yeah, silent films. And there's like 5 or 6 of those, which are rather strange in that regard. The Doctor bumps into Bing Crosby, because why not? And they sort of, yeah, end up stumbling into multiple film sets and just kind of getting chased around in a very sort of pantomime style, sort of silly style, being running around corridors and chasing each other and anything like that. And it's just all a bit strange. it gets quite confusing because I think there's a lot of kind of people talking over each other and lots of kind of back ambient noise, and so it's quite difficult to pick out exactly what's going on based on some of the dialogue and sounds. Particularly in sections it's sort of played like a silent film, so there isn't actually that much dialogue or stuff to hear. And when you've got very few in the way of pictures or anything of this story, it is a little bit hard to follow exactly what's going on, and why any of this is happening is completely bewildering. I mean, I read a review where it describes it as a bit like a pantomime, and I can definitely see that. It is just kind of like a bit of a silly bit of over-the-top television that kind of everybody. There's a fair few sort of over-the-top campy performances. A couple of the directors are quite crazy in the film set half of the episode. The first half has nothing to do with the second half, as I say, which is rather bizarre as well. And we get to the end of this episode, and like, it's nothing has progressed in the plot or anything, and it feels like you haven't achieved anything particularly in this episode either. Yes, I know exactly what it's meant to be. It is meant to be just 25 minutes of silly Christmas fun in a pantomime style that the kids will enjoy and laugh at and find funny when the Doctor and Co end up running onto a silly little film set and having to run around and get chased by people. Like, probably for children at the time, that would have been quite funny to watch. But as kind of looking back at it as an episode of Doctor Who, it probably doesn't stand up to the test of time particularly well, I think it's fair to say. So yes, it's just one of those wholly weird episodes of Doctor Who. There's obviously a lot of missing episodes from classic Doctor Who. I think there's 97 at the moment, but this is probably the most just strange one I've watched, where you don't really understand why anything that's happening is particularly happening. And I think that's the point. As I say, it's meant to just be a bit silly and fun, and it's to a degree, but I think it's difficult not having any visuals to be able to sort of understand quite what's going on in the same way. And obviously it's never going to happen, as I say. It's like extremely unlikely it's ever going to happen, but if I actually was able to see the kind of visuals of that as well, it might enhance the enjoyment a little bit of this story. Or at least maybe if they look to animate this story as well, because of course Dalek Master Plan is one of the top sort of stories that people want to be animated of upcoming animations. As we know, it seems like they're finally going to be looking to animate a lot of classic episodes. Dalek Master Plan is one of the least likely stories to be recovered any more episodes of, so it makes sense to animate it, as it's a particularly popular one as well. And presumably that would include the Feast of Stephen, so we might get to see a little bit more of a visual representation of this story in the future. Who knows? I would quite like to see it, because yes, as much as it does just seem a little bit odd, and it's kind of like not that enjoyable because it's just so strange, and it's kind of almost really hard to have a strong opinion on this story because it's just a bit weird and it's hard to understand what's going on. And so maybe if we had an animation, it might just be a little bit more easy to understand in that regard. So hopefully that might be something we get in the future. Yeah, just to make it a little bit more sort of understandable, this story. And then of course probably the most famous part of this episode that a fair amount of people probably know of is the First Doctor, William Hartnell, breaking the fourth wall right at the end of the story to wish everybody at home a Merry Christmas, which is just the sort of thing that they used to do in 1960s BBC sort of, or TV programmes really, and Christmas specials of 1960s programmes. Back then, you would just chuck a little sort of a Merry Christmas to you all at home sort of thing from one of the main characters at the end of the episode. So it was normal for the time, but obviously looks very weird now, and is very, very hard to kind of come up with a canon explanation for it. Because it is, I was reading, it's pretty much the only time where it's obvious that the Doctor is addressing the audience and is addressing to a camera the audience. Because of course there are moments where the Doctor breaks the fourth wall. You think of the start of Before the Flood, when the Doctor's running around talking about Beethoven in the TARDIS, but that could still be explained as him talking to himself or talking at a character or something like that. It can still be explained away in other ways, whereas this is just very blatantly obvious that he is just breaking the fourth wall and saying Merry Christmas to you all at home. Which is nice, it's a bit funny, but yes, it's one of those things you kind of just have to forget about because you really can't explain it away within the sort of canonicity of the Doctor Who universe, shall we say. But for the BBC it was just kind of one of those, like, it's a silly Christmas special that's only ever going to be seen once by the set of people and never again. So why not? Let's chuck it in. It's a bit of fun. It's quite nice, and that would have been the thought process. And yeah, I guess it adds something to it. But yes, it is just a little bit weird when you're watching it back now in the context of everything else, and it's just a bit unexplainable. So yes, this is the Feast of Stephen, the original Doctor Who Christmas special from 1965. It was before 2005. It was the only other Doctor Who episode to ever air on Christmas Day. We had a couple of episodes airing on New Year's Day. The following episode, Dalek Master Plan, of course. I think the first episode of Day of the Daleks, an episode of The Face of Evil from 1972 and 1977. Those two episodes were sort of, yeah, had an episode air on New Year's Day. But apart from that, it's very, very rare to have in Classic Who episodes airing during the festive period, or on the two big festive days, should we say, of Christmas Day and New Year's Day. But yes, probably 40 years earlier than you probably realise was the original Doctor Who Christmas special. I would recommend, if you've got the time, go and look up the loose cannon reconstruction of it, which does attempt to put a bit of sort of animation and graphics and just create a slightly... This is the version I watched, and it does the best job they possibly can with what's available to try and make it as easy to follow and understand as possible. It's not perfect, it can't really be without proper animation, I think, but they've done a good job, and it is worth a watch just to kind of see, particularly if you're into Classic Who but haven't got around to that period of it yet, just to kind of see what is a completely bizarre 25 minutes of television, really, that sort of has no better explanation than just purely strange. So yes, that is the original Doctor Who Christmas special, The Feast of Stephen. Guys, do let me know if you've seen it before down in the comments below, what you think of it. What's your perspective on this as a story? Do you have any other suggestions, any canon reasons as to why the Doctor addresses to camera, sort of breaking the fourth wall and addressing to camera at the end of the episode? Love to hear if you can explain that away, or just your general thoughts on this as a Doctor Who little episode. But that's just about it from this video, guys. So you remember to hit that like button, subscribe if you're new here, and of course, incidentally, a happy Christmas to all of you at home.